Why millionaires are suddenly moving to Italy? The 2025 wealth migration data came out and what it revealed shocked me. We are seeing an unprecedented level of millionaires fleeing their own countries, and many are choosing a very surprising location. Not Dubai, not Singapore, but a country that everyone has dismissed as a finished, bureaucratic, or perhaps just a vacation spot. That country is Italy. So in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you why millionaires are fleeing London for Milan, the government programs involved that almost nobody is talking about. This is why, in my view, after this video, you may decide that you want to relocate to Italy, especially if you are a high net worth individual, but not only, even a remote worker. I think this could be genuinely one of the best and biggest lifestyle opportunities that we have seen in decades. Now, let's dive into it. Let me start with the data that made me really pay attention to this. It's absolutely official. The wealthy don't protest, they exit. The 2025 Wealth Migration Report shows something quite extraordinary. The UK overtook China as the world's biggest source of millionaires outflow. Think about that for just a second. So the UK, which is one of the most stable economies in the world, is now objectively building wealth faster than China. It's crazy, but if you're following along with what's happening over there, in the end, it's not really surprising. Now, the key question is, where are they going? And the UAE, of course, remains number one place, but Italy made a massive jump up in the rankings. And here is what it's driving it. Italy's 200,000 euro flat tax, soon 300K, on all foreign income has been one of the major drivers. Let me explain you why this is extraordinary. If you're earning 10 millions abroad in the UK, you might pay over 4 million in taxes. Well, in Italy, just 200,000 euro. And that's it. You don't have wealth tax, you don't have inheritance tax on foreign assets of sort, and zero disclosure requirements above the basic ones, and a 15-year guarantee protected by law. If you could legally pay, let's say, 200K instead of millions for 15 years for living in an amazing country like Italy, wouldn't you really switch countries? Well, that's what exactly happening and why the numbers prove it. In just only the first part of 2024, over 4,000 people applied for this flat tax program, and that was a 4 times increase over 2023. And the interesting part is that this happened after the flat tax doubled from 100K to 200K per year. So over 100,000 people have moved back to Italy under the so-called regime rimpatriati, or the repatriates regime, mainly to Milan, but not only. They get essentially a 50% tax exemption on income. With that, Milan luxury real estate is booming and the city wealth resident count has doubled. Now, this could be the biggest wealth migration in Europe that objectively has been seen in decades, and overall I would say quietly Milan is becoming Europe's new wealth capital. As I wrote a few weeks ago, Milan, in my view, is becoming the sort of new London, perhaps a new roaring London of the 90s, with of course more sunlight. What is really fascinating to me is to watch tax policy reshape Europe's financial map in real time. What it really matters to me is that there are always nuances that people don't realize at first sight. By the way, if you're new here, in the coming weeks I'll be sharing updates and strategies when it comes to Europe, especially, not only, so make sure to hit the subscribe button to follow along. The truth is that Italy is not just one single program, it's 4 different tax regimes for 4 different types of people, from retirees to researchers, from working professionals to ultra wealthy individuals. Let me break down who each one is for. Program number 1, for the ultra high net worth individuals. 200,000 euro per year of flat tax on all foreign income. This includes capital gains, dividends, business income, rental income, essentially everything. You have 15 years of guarantee. There is no wealth tax, no inheritance tax on foreign assets of every kind. Soon, this 200K will become 300K per year. And in my view, over the years, this actual regime will become stricter and stricter. What is this for? Well, multimillionaires earning significant foreign income. If you're earning 5 millions or more per year from foreign sources, this is probably the best tax structure in Europe right now. Worth noting, provisional data shows over 4,000 applications by mid-2024. This is after the tax doubled from 100K to 200K again. So this tells you everything about the demand. Well, the trade-off, you must establish, of course, the Italian tax residency, and of course, 200K per year, even if you are an ultra net worth individual, well, it's not really nothing, right? But compared to paying millions eventually everywhere, well, I think overall the math is pretty straightforward, and there is, of course, a matter of lifestyle. Let's move to number 2. Program number 2, which is for retirees, and this is, in my view, one of the hidden gems, especially after Portugal removed the specific regime for pensioners. How does it work? You get 7% on all foreign income for 10 years, and Very importantly, this includes pensions, capital gains, dividends, rental income, all foreign income. It's a universal 7% income. Now, there is one catch, okay? Very important. You need to relocate in a small town under 20,000 inhabitants in one of the 8 southern regions and some central ones with some nuances. They are Sicily, Calabria, Sardinia, Campania, Basilicata, Abruzzo, Molise, or Puglia. You might hear this and think, oh, so you are exiled to forgotten villages, nobody will know anymore where you live, who knows, maybe I won't have even a postal code there. Well, this is the reality. Sorrento qualifies, Taormina and Sicily, Capri I think technically as well, so there are amazing touristic spots that technically would qualify for this 7%. And of course, the stunning Sardinian coastal gems like Bosa, for example, or Carloforte qualify again. If we need to pick up one in Campania, check it out, perhaps Castellabate. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site with about 9,000 residents, so it qualifies perfectly. Now, I'm for sure biased, but there is no better place in the world to retire than Italy. Now, in my view, this structure could bring infinite happiness to many families, and you don't need to be a multi-millionaire to benefit. Before I dive into more positive actual aspects of this program, I think we need to address one key question that everyone always asks me. Am I going to feel isolated? Will I find proper services? Well, in my view, it's critical if you perhaps are considering this program that you check it out. Maybe you spend a few months first in a specific place, perhaps in proximity to a larger city, so that you can still access to eventually better services coming from a larger city, maybe a more active environment, and of course you can have your primary residency as required by law in a smaller village, but you don't need to spend the entire day necessarily isolated eventually in a place with maybe not so many cultural attractions per se. This requires some degree of structuring, some active study, and again, if you are into this activity and you enjoy the idea or the same activity of doing it, well, this could be for you. If we want to look a bit of other positive sides, I think we should definitely consider the real estate reality. Why? Because if you look at coastal homes in places like Scilla, Calabria, well, you will find purchasing price which is very low, eventually below 1,000 euro per square meter. Lakefront houses, for example, in Bolsena, Lazio, 1 hour and a half from Rome, in the realm of 1.2k per square meter. Interior villages often under 1,000 euro per square meter. Now, most of them are not abandoned ruins. They are functioning communities, there are restaurants, services, and the interesting part is that they just appear to be priced like if it was still, I don't know, 1995 or something like this, pre-Microsoft and so far and so on. If you want to consider the food, of course, well, I have so many stories to tell you. Let me tell you just one. My parents actually have a house in the province of Frosinone, not particularly known for being elegant on posh, and to be frank, we have never gone there for almost, 30 years. I even didn't understand why they wanted to spend time there, until in the last few years, I've been living abroad in multiple countries. They kept sending me every weekend some pictures of incredible food. At 20 euro, 20 to 25 euro price points for a full meal with wine, I don't often see that level of food sophistication even in capital cities. That's when I realized, well, probably with this we're living really the greatest lifestyle arbitrage in human history. Option number 3, program 3 for working professionals. Well, this is where things get really interesting for many of you working in tech, not working in tech. Well, there is a 50 or to 60% tax exemption on income for 5 years, and 60% specifically happens in case you have a dependent child. In the end, if you're already in the phase of life with a beautiful family and so far and so on. Let me give you a bit of, first of all, of what this means in practice. Say that you are self-employed, say that you are earning about $85,000 per year and you have a kid, where your taxable income is going to be 40% of this total, which is going to be about 29k, and you'd pay approximately 7,984 in taxes. So this means that essentially is going to be more or less a 9.4% of effective tax rate. Ballpark figure on 85k, you would retain possibly 77k. Very importantly, there is social security in Italy, so in the end you're going to pay on top of it at least another 20%, right? So what I'm referring to is specifically the taxation due for income only. If you are considering to move to Italy exclusively because of eventual tax opportunity, you are making a big mistake. Italy is not going to be a tax haven of any sort. Italy eventually will grant you the applicability of a specific tax exemption regime, which is good, but it will never be comparable with more competitive systems for this, like Thailand, Dubai, and so far and so on. Let me tell you just a few more notes to clarify the requirements for this specific regime are quite straightforward. You need to have a university degree or a high-level professional skill. You of course need to commit to stay in Italy for 4 years. You can't have lived as an Italian tax resident at least in the previous 3 years in the country, and of course there is a cap at about 600k annually. One last point, this is what typically confuses people. You can invoice people worldwide as a freelancer from Italy, okay? So this program doesn't require you necessarily to incorporate a company or doing business exclusively in Italy, exclusively with Italian companies. Now, here is where program 4 for researchers and R&D. This is very niche, but I'm reporting you because if you are out there and you are a researcher, a professor, or even work in R&D, you could potentially, as a researcher in Italy, if you move, and of course in Italy there are other conditions, achieve a 90% exemption on taxation on income for up to 13 years. So the normal impatriati is for up to 5 years right now after the 2024 actual amendment, but for this specific regime, the duration is up to 13 years. What does it mean in practice? I'm not going to give you again all the calculations, otherwise it would be boring, but you're going to pay more or less between 2 and 3% of effective tax rate, depending on more conditions, up to 13 years. This potentially applies also to people working in R&D, okay, departments of companies, and perhaps even startups. Italy versus Portugal, the surprising truth. Now, Italy is frequently actually associated with Portugal. Should I move to Italy? Should I move to Portugal? What's the most interesting and valuable? Well, first and foremost, the archi-famous program coming from Portugal named NHR is not anymore available. There is a variation of it, the IFISI, which is more restrictive, more demanding. Portugal, right now under the IFISI regime, and most importantly, the crypto related tax regime, only in that case, Portugal is the clear big winner. For anything else, and especially for pensioners, well, Italy, for pensioners right now, is the most convenient pathway. And in my view, this is a phenomenal actually opportunity that as a country we have to attract wealth. So let's be clear about who Italy actually works for, because these programs aren't for everyone. Italy works brilliantly for ultra wealthy individuals with the 200k, soon 300k flat tax. Once again, the second category that in my view can benefit enormously out of this program are the retirees, and we have analyzed in detail how the 7% taxation applies to you, what are the conditions. So third category, remote workers. This is also something quite relevant in my view for anyone who is earning from abroad, but not only, even someone who eventually is going to be employed by an Italian company. 50 up to 60% exemption on income. This is the wild card nobody is using about if you are even more a professor or a researcher by work. I think this opportunity is something extraordinary, honestly. Here is also where things get really interesting for Bitcoin first investors. I think you heard of me for this reason. We have built something that didn't exist before, and usually Golden Visa programs requires you always to invest in assets or companies in general not so well aligned with you. Very long story short, I'm the one who created a Bitcoin Golden Visa, Bitcoin ecosystem Golden Visa fund in Portugal, essentially uniting Bitcoin and citizenship pathways for the first time in the same product. We did it again and we launched with great success our Italian Bitcoin startup. This is an interesting point if you're looking for an investor visa to Italy, which is a different kind of need. If you're interested in this kind of accessibility and flexibility, you can achieve that with an investor visa, which requires you to invest, for example, in 250k in a local startup or 500k in a company. We created a startup that actually maintains exposure to Bitcoin the whole time. So this means that eventually, if you're interested in private placements of the shares of the startup, well, this could be one way where you can eventually maintain exposure to Bitcoin, and at the same time, you can obtain an investor visa, and you can renew it initially after 2 years, and then since that moment, every 3 years, potentially endlessly, so maintaining access to Italy with full flexibility and of course traveling to Schengen without losing exposure to Bitcoin. Now let's talk about something the tax programs don't capture, the actual lifestyle, because this is where Italy becomes truly asymmetric. Milan is back, and I mean back. Portofino is 2 hours away, Lake Garda is in 90 minutes, skiing in Courmayeur beneath Mont Blanc is in 2.5 hours. Florence is in 1 hour and 45 minutes by train. This is an unparalleled lifestyle. You have the mountains, the lakes, the coast, and world-class cities all within 2 hours. Now, you can show me another place in the world with that combination. Of course, Milan has its own challenges. I think Milan can be an interesting spot for you. Multiple people from London moved there. Now, besides this, over 100,000 repatriates, 4,000 ultra-wealthy applicants as we have seen. Well, the city wealth count has doubled, and in my view there is a vibe shift happening. Wrote also about that Rome is coming back, and you have no idea of how much happiness this gave me to me. This is the story I want to share with you. I have an old friend, Roman at heart, who has been living between Dubai and Thailand, and for the past 10 years, every single time we got back to eventually Rome, well, it was my trusted eventually sparring partner for commenting about the state of Rome. And for a decade, it was always the same list. I mean, in the end, dirty, chaotic, garbage everywhere, and sometimes, of course, unsafe. Well, this is super evident, especially after maybe Singapore, after Dubai. Well, for the first time in a decade, this year in 2025, there was a vibe shift, of course, eventually generated partially also due to the Jubilee, but he noticed it, and he's a very scrupulous, detail-oriented person. Improvements, cleaner streets, parts of our whole neighborhood were made pedestrian, and overall was made more livable as a city. Well, it's not going to be the Asian service quality like eventually Bangkok, but for once, Rome has been known hopeless. You can replicate Singapore's efficiency, you can replicate Dubai efficiency eventually, but you can't replicate Italy's history. And in my view, this asymmetry right now is creating an important arbitrage opportunity. I think that overall infrastructure always follows two different curves. One is exponential, for example, the internet. Eventually with Starlink, you can get 100 plus megabytes of speed almost anywhere. But at the same time, there is also a different kind of eventually trajectory, which is more linear, right? And eventually authentic restaurants, walkable, incredible, ancient, cultural rich streets. Well, these actually things require centuries to develop. They require different speed, and it's not easy to replicate them because by definition they require time that can't be right now replicated. So in my view, the south of Italy has this strength. In the next 10 years will be appreciated more and more. In the high age, the geographical proximity to eventually the industries of the north of Europe is less important, guys. Why now matters? It is what I've learned watching citizenship programs Europe. Typically these windows of opportunities, they don't stay open forever. When it comes to optionality, when it comes to residency by investment programs, citizenship by investment programs, tax exemption regimes, they are subject to very sudden changes. Why? Because the political willingness beyond and behind these programs is constantly changing. It's always better eventually to be 3 days earlier than 1 single day later on this program. So if you're interested in one of them, study them, ask your own advisor for further eventually explanations, but actually act now because these opportunities, I'm pretty sure, are not going to be out there forever. So look, finally, I'm Italian and I have to tell you that I dismissed my own country many times. I arrived to the point where I lived pretty much everywhere except maybe the US. I lived in Dubai, I'm constantly in Singapore. I even lived in India, Bangalore, and from an abroad perspective, especially if you work in tech, I think you are keen to think, okay, Italy is finished. Well, I think that net I was wrong, and this is what I've learned watching some of the most, in general, sophisticated people and allocators that I work with right now, or they're my clients. I think that in general, the right approach is never trying to buy certainty. I think you can buy and you should buy and invest on optionality, which sometimes means eventually acquiring the capability of making decisions later on when you have perhaps more information. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to hit this channel around topics about global living, but not only, actually citizenship, residencies, and so far and so on. I would love to hear your feedback. I hope you enjoyed this video about Italy, and I look forward to hear your questions, your comments. If you like this content, not only here on YouTube, but actually consider to give me a follow on Substack for my weekly letter, and on X, or the former Twitter, where I'm very active almost at any time of the day and sometimes also of the night. From here, it's everything. I hope to see you one day eventually to live in Italy and eventually start learning a bit of Italian because it will be for sure required. Grazie mille e alla prossima!